Hello everyone, it's James Marcum with another biblical prescription for life. Many of you are new and I want to encourage you to like it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe and share so we can get this type of information to the entire world. But I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for your comments on different things because it helps many people that come to these videos each week. So I want to thank you for that. Today, we're going to continue. We're now part 3 on our series on dementia. And remember, in part 1 of the dementia, we talked about what it was, how it was diagnosed, and there's no one clinical test. Usually starts with memory, behavior, forgetfulness, those type of issues. Go back and watch the first one if you didn't see it. Number 2, we talked about all dementia is not permanent. We talked about all of the reversible causes of dementia, including vitamins and different toxins, different medical problems that you could reverse. And that is good to know. So if you haven't seen that, go back on that. And then we introduced a word called inflammation. There's 3 important words I want you to keep during this series. One of them's inflammation. We're going to introduce another word today because a lot of this dementia seems to be involved with inflammation in the brain and some of the changes that occurs. So today we're going to talk about the different types of dementia that might not be reversible. These are the long-term chronic ones, but they definitely need to be known about. We need to pick up them early, and there's things that we can do to slow down progression and maybe in some people reverse the process. But before we do that, I want to share a Bible text with you. This is a longer one today from Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16. For you have formed my inwards parts. You have covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. So this text lets us know that God, the Creator, the one who wants to give to us, the one that wants to take care of us and serve us, He knew us before we were even born, when we are in our mother's womb. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and He has a plan for each one of us. I want you to hold that to you as we talk about dementia. So there's different types of dementia. The first type I want to talk about is Alzheimer's. Many of you heard of that one. And here is a picture of a brain with Alzheimer's disease. When the brain gets older, parts of it sort of shrivel up, it gets smaller, especially the cortex. The ventricles fill more with cerebral spinal fluid, and the hippocampus tends to shrink. And sometimes in Alzheimer's disease, we can see these abnormal proteins form called amyloid and tau proteins. I wanted to start with amyloid because this usually affects the entire brain. It usually happens over 65, and it's the most common cause of dementia that's progressive, that's not reversible. Sometimes if it's happening in younger ages, we can look and see if there's genetic factors. There's certain genes, the PSEN1 gene and the PSEN2 genes, also the APOE24 allele. If you have those problems, you have an increased likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. Personally, I don't think I would want to know, but I want to do everything to help not get Alzheimer's and lower the risk. But basically, now we're learning that a lot of this Alzheimer's disease in the brain, you develop these amyloid plaques, the beta amyloid, and what these do, also the tau proteins as well, they call them tangles. Well, these plaques and tangles, they disrupt brain cell communications. That triggers inflammation. Brain cells die. When brain cells die, we don't think as well. So that's the number one cause of disease, dementia, that might not be reversible. We give that the name Alzheimer's dementia. It's usually made by making sure there's no reversible causes and then focusing on MRIs and brain scans and that kind of thing. We're going to talk about next time we're going to get together, we're going to talk about some of the treatments. The second type I wanted you to be aware of is very common. I see that a lot. That's vascular dementia. And the key word today, remember we talked about inflammation because this is happening in Alzheimer's disease. It's happening in other forms of dementia. But in vascular disease, I want you to remember endothelium. That's the lining of blood vessels. And blood vessels go throughout the brain. Starting in the neck, we have these two carotid arteries. It goes through all of the blood vessels. The brain needs the blood vessels to bring the needed materials, the oxygen, the vital substrates for it to live, and also to remove the waste in the brain. If the blood vessels are damaged, we can have damage to the brain, which can lead to dementia. We call that vascular dementia. I saw a gentleman today that had vascular dementia, and he had blockages in the arteries of the carotids. He probably had blockages diffusely in the brain. These blockages can lead to strokes if the blood vessels are so damaged that the blood doesn't flow. Sometimes, this is very common, we get vascular dementia for blood clots that clog up these blood vessels. And the most common cause I see in the hospital is atrial fibrillation. The top part of the heart goes faster than the bottom part, gets a clot in it, the clot goes upstream to the brain, clogs up one of these vessels, that part of the brain doesn't get enough oxygen and dies, creates a stroke. That's a very common cause of vascular dementia. So the arteries themselves can get damaged. You can have blood clots that go to them as well. Sometimes the clots even come from weak hearts and other spots. So vascular dementia, the same disease that blocks up the arteries of the heart, can block up the arteries of the brain. That is a very common cause. That's why one of the key words I want you to remember today is endothelium. So we have two words to remember: inflammation, endothelium. These are going to be very important to remember as we go on, because these are ways we can reverse possibly the disease and treat the disease. Well, the next two types that I want to talk about, these chronic dementias, is Lewy body. That's L-E-W-Y, Lewy body dementia. And again, that type of dementia, again, we put abnormal protein deposits in the brain, and it also leads a lot of times to movement disorders. And I wanted, the way doctors find out if you have this type of dementia, they do MRI scan. So usually after the reversible causes are done, a good history and physical, the doctor will order these imaging tests to learn a little bit about more what type you have and how to treat it. For we would approach vascular dementia and the endothelium a little bit different than we would approach Alzheimer's with the plaques. And also the Lewy body dementia. Now, Lewy body dementia is often associated with more movement disorders, Parkinson's-like shaking disorders. We don't see that as much. It's not as common. And lastly, I want to talk about Pick's disease, and that's spelled P-I-C-K-S. It's a type of dementia that's not usually reversible. And this involves the frontal temporal parts of the brain, and often it's heralding symptom is behavioral problems. And it also has a protein called the tau protein. It tends to be in younger people, and this type of dementia seems to progress more rapidly than the other types. We've also heard of other types of dementia that's genetics. There's Huntington's, and that is genetic, usually autosomal dominant. Usually that involves a chromosome that we can check on. We can do some genetic testing, and unfortunately this is inherited, and it usually happens in the age of 30 to 50. So those are the basic types of dementia that usually aren't as easily treated as the reversible ones that we talked about yesterday. They're usually diagnosed with MRIs and other types of imaging. We treat them in different ways, but it's important for us to have a basic understanding of the type of dementia that you have so we can focus on the treatments. And remember, the two words that I've given you so far is inflammation and endothelium. Very important to remember those as we move forward, because that's going to give us a framework as we talk next time about the treatments. We're going to talk about the natural treatments. We're going to talk about the medical treatments, the pros and cons. So you want to talk about that next time we're together. But I want you to also remember this encouraging text that you can share with people that might be developing these problems. And just refer them back to Psalms 139. It talks in verse 14 about praising God, for you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and how God has known us better than we know ourselves, knew us in the womb. He knows what our problems are going to be, our health problems. He knows how to take care of us. He's known us. It says, and in your book, they were all written, the days fashioned for me. He knows our future, our beginning, our end. We can depend on our Creator to serve us, to care for us, to love us, to give us the good things that we need, both now and forever. So be sure to share this with your friends and neighbors. Give it a like. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We're going to continue this series next time. We're going to start talking about the different treatments, both lifestyle treatments. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of medicines. Don't forget our words, inflammation and endothelium, because this is how we're going to wrap up this subject of dementia. I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I'll be back very soon with yet another biblical prescription for life.